predators, they can smell a prey. And I was prey because first of all, I hated myself to the deepest level. I hated me. I couldn't stand me. And so whenever someone came around and said, oh, like he used my religion against me. He said, God told me God wants us to be together. We're supposed to be together. This is God's will. He just used jargon that worked, right? Because I was a victim in my head. And by the way, we are all victims until we go through our healing journey. We all think like a victim and we act like one.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Nourished Inside Out. Today, I'm here with Tammy Cox, and she's a trauma specialist. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tammy.
Thank you for having me, darling. This isn't our first rodeo, but I love being in your presence, and I'm so honored to be on your podcast.
Do you mind telling us a little bit about your journey and what has inspired you to specialize in trauma?
Yes. How far back you want me to go, girl? Because we could go all the way back.
As far as you like.
Okay. I'll kind of brief on some stuff. I'll touch on some things and you kind of tell me where you want to zoom in, okay? Because I'm wide open. Like you can go there, go as deep as you want. When I came into this world, honey, I came into a very toxic family. There was a lot of violence. In fact, there wasn't really any days that went by where there wasn't physical violence. So my father was very physically violent. And then also my siblings and I were very violent towards each other. So physical violence was a normal part of my life. I thought it was how everyone was. My father was also very controlling. He was abusive. But the control kind of went around a religious structure. So we were very religious. The list of don'ts were incredibly long. My older sister was developmentally delayed. Is still, because she's still around. She's the most violent of my siblings. In fact, she's been arrested more times than I could count. She was very hard to live with. I was scared of her my whole life because, she got the most beating from my dad. And because of that, she was obviously way more violent. And so you just could not predict her behavior. And it was scary to live in a house with her and my dad. So fast forward to the age 11, my parents sat us down and said, your dad has AIDS and he is dying. So my dad went from being this big, very muscular man to shriveling up and aging actually very quickly. Started to lose his sight, couldn't walk. So he had full-blown AIDS for 3 months as he, shriveled down to nothing. And then, a month later he dies. We had no idea that he had this disease and he had had it for my whole life. They found out he had it when my mom was pregnant with my brother, who's 2 years younger than me. So chances are, being that this was the 80s, he had it from before I was born. So after he died, I spent my teenage years pretty angry. I was mad at the world. I'd go through these really low cycles where I'd get incredibly depressed, and even suicidal at some points. And so here I go into my adulthood with all this unhealed shit. I go into my adulthood and I get married and have my first baby. And that's when all of my triggers started sounding. They just rattling, rolling, all this trauma in my body started to bubble to the surface. And I realized that I was not okay. I was really, really not okay. And so I looked for all sorts of different ways. I found different remedies to sort of numb myself over the years. But when I became a mom, none of those numbing mechanisms really worked anymore. I just had stuff I had to deal with. Being raised in religion, I dove into religion. I dove into books, therapies. I mean, you name it, I did it. Anything that was out there, I looked for any way to fix me. And they'd be Band-Aids, they'd work, they'd be okay for a little bit, but nothing really changed me. for very long. It wasn't until I started doing the inner child healing. It wasn't until I started looking at my trauma and going within and fixing myself, finding, pretty much removing, it's what I do with my clients, which is removing the pain trapped in the body, removing the pain attached, attached to these traumatic events. So once I started doing that, I started to notice that my identity was changing. I was literally showing up as a different person, and I was changing so fast. And so what ended up happening was, even though my husband and I had a toxic marriage for many years, that changed. We became incredibly connected. I finally started to love myself. I finally started to let love in. I became a better mom. I became a better wife, a better person. I started to change in every single way, and every relationship reflected that, as it does. And so from there, I was like, this is the gift that I want to give and bring to the world, because everyone needs this. We all have trauma. Every one of us, maybe not as traumatic as my childhood, but everyone has trauma that holds you back from being the biggest, most beautiful expression of what you really came here to do. So I realized in that moment, as I started to heal myself, that this was the reason why I chose to come into this life and have the events that I did, because I had to find these methods. And so as you experience, as I started working with my clients, I wanted to find methods that worked really, really fast, because my journey was very long and I found a lot of shit that didn't work. And I wanted to be able to find a system where I could help people shift very, very fast. I've honed in on that gift, and now I have my podcast where I take someone through that process, Behind the Veil, Anonymous Transformations. It's fully anonymous. That means that we could go as deep as I want, and they don't have to worry about someone seeing it.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that. It's a really vulnerable thing to share. And I'm really thankful that you are willing to share that, because a lot of times there's so many things that happen in our childhood that we don't even realize that other people are going through or have gone through those similar things. I can actually relate with you. When you and I first connected, like there's so many like boxes that we can relate with, from career to relationship. And I actually remember I was always scared of my brother growing up as well, because I was always scared of him beating me up, and he was scared of me because he was scared of me beating him up with my
Mm.
words. And it was just always that conflict. It's something that we don't really talk about, but we've just kind of moved on in our own ways as well. And it's something that you can carry on. And even if you think it's not affecting you, it does affect you until you fully dive in deep. When we initially started talking, we both had a similar career once upon a time of hairstyling and getting into a marriage early on in those times. Can you explain what that was and how you would process your emotions and deal with the situations and the triggers?
Yeah, because I was in the religious system, I met this guy when I was 20, and he was very manipulative. And even though I had no desire to be with him, because I was in a really vulnerable place, my grandma had just died and she was my dad's mom. So there was a lot of connection to, it was like grieving my father's death again. Grief is sort of weird like that when I remember everyone that died after my dad, it was like a grieving of his death all over again. So my grandma had died right before I met this guy, and he must have smelled it. Predators, they can smell a prey. And I was prey, because first of all, I hated myself to the deepest level. I hated me. I couldn't stand me. And so whenever someone came around and said, "Oh, like he used my religion against me." He said, "God told me God wants us to be together. We're supposed to be together. This is God's will." He just used jargon that worked, right? Because I was a victim in my head. And by the way, we are all victims until we go through our healing journey. We all think like a victim and we act like one. So here I was, this complete victim, and I fell for all of it. I had no desire to be with this guy, and I let him talk me into marrying him, right? And then I marry him, and from the moment I marry him, he wants nothing to do with me. Like, he's just like, he didn't work. I worked, so I took care of him. He was like a child. And he cheated on me the whole time, which was like a year and a half, thank goodness. And just said awful things about me, treated me like absolute dirt. And I just took it, right? Because that's what I believed I was worthy of having. The thing was, is I tell people I married my dad the first time and I married my stepdad the second time. So my first husband was a lot like my dad, very much a sexual addiction. Like, my dad had a full blown sexual addiction. This guy did too. He was very narcissistic, so knew how to control and manipulate words to make it look like you're the crazy one, for even thinking I would do something like that, just very manipulative. And I see it so often with my clients now. A lot of them have those kind of spouses. So it's interesting as I look back, because it was very short lived, but I attracted him into my life because I had all this unhealed trauma. Like, he was essentially my dad.
I can completely relate. I think a lot of times, like, if we're not getting familiar with the healing journey and choosing to heal our wounded parts that we don't talk about, then we're just going to continue to attract those things. I remember when I was 20 years old, I attracted a guy, and same thing, exactly what you said. He was abusive, he was manipulative, a whole nine yards. And it's because I hated myself on the inside. I couldn't look myself in the mirror for even 10 minutes and tell myself that I love myself, because I was just so used to getting beat down from my ex that I believed it. So then whatever he would say, I would just believe all of those negative things.
Yeah. That's what we do. That's why I tell my daughters, please don't ever get married until after 25. When you have all your mental faculties, please at least wait till 25, ideally at least 30. And please don't get married until you've dealt with your own trauma. Like, if you've got unhealed shit, your marriage is it's pretty much guaranteed to be miserable until you go within.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I remember when I was in high school, I was telling myself, I'm like, okay, Aneta, you're not going to get married until you're at least 25. Like, 25 seems like a healthy age. Your frontal lobe is more developed, whatever. Now I'm 25 and I already went through the marriage and the divorce, and I'm like, wow, like, that just feels like a flick. Like, it doesn't even feel real. So I would definitely recommend that as well. What are some common signs that childhood trauma is affecting an individual's current relationship?
Read your triggers. Triggers are just information. We like to judge them. We like to use that word a lot, but look at your triggers and study yourself. Start asking yourself, why do I do this? Look at jealousy. Why would I get jealous? What's the belief underneath it? When I'm working with a client, what I'm really doing is looking for their belief systems. We're looking for those belief patterns, specifically the ones that are holding you back from the things that you want. So when it comes to a love relationship, what are your beliefs? Start to dig into that, because you're really not going to attract a healthy relationship until you have some healthy beliefs around what a love relationship looks like and who you are. Right? Because if you are in love with yourself, fully in love with yourself, you are going to attract the perfect partner for you. But if you have self-hatred, if you're practicing some really low thoughts and beliefs about yourself, you're going to attract some crappy people. So start looking at who you're attracting into your life. And you can look at everyone, not just, romance, but friends. When you leave anyone's company, do you feel uplifted or do you feel lowered? That's a great way to determine how someone's affecting your energy. If anyone's pulling you down, you have to maybe not release them, but if it's a friend that you don't want to let go of, you got to limit that time together, because for you to be in love with yourself is for you to value your time. And if you're spending time with people that don't fill your cup up, you're depleting yourself.
That's so beautiful. I think a lot of times it can be hard for us to want to let go of people who we're used to, like people we grew up with or people that we've been friends with for a long time. But something that I've also been learning is like, you don't have to fully cut off people from your life. It's okay to love them from a distance as well. What's your take on that?
I think it's beautiful, like as long as it works. Everyone's different in this. Like I consider myself a really loyal person. And so for me, it was really hard to make space. I'm also black and white. I'm an all or nothing kind of girl. Like you're either real close to me or you're real far. I have a really hard time with gray area, just my personality. But some people, higher supporters, more like your personality, they're really good with gray. So you would be absolutely great at being able to hold the space for having a more distant relationship than my personality. But here's the thing, if you're on your healing journey, you got to study everything about yourself. You have to constantly be asking, what would I have to believe about myself in order to feel these emotions? Right? And look at the negative ones. If you're in a negative state, what would I have to believe about myself to hold these negative emotions? Be a studier of yourself and then look at your triggers. What bothers you? Dissect it. I have my clients get out their journal if they're triggered. What is bothering me? What is bothering me? And I have them just list everything out till they get it all out. And then usually at the bottom of that, when they feel complete, is the belief. Right? Be a studier of yourself and really figure out what it is that you desire. Because if you're doing things that don't bring you joy, you're depleting yourself day in and day out. And I'd say this is the majority of the world. Not you, Aneta, because look at you. You've followed your desires. You're on your healing path, right? But for those of you who are in a miserable job, you're with a miserable partner. Every day, you're not having any fun, right? This is a sign, a clue, a hint that it's time to go within and it's time to heal yourself, because you did not come here to be miserable. And you didn't come here to run on someone else's system with a government that says, hey, you're going to work 9 to 5. Actually, you're going to work the majority of your life in order to put more money in my account. Like, what are we doing here? Can we wake up, please? We need to be living for our own joy and our own desires. And when we do that, life is fun. Do you not agree?
A lot of times we're taught growing up, go to school, get a good job, find someone, settle down. What I've learned on my journey so far is that everybody has a different definition of how they want to enjoy life. Maybe some people want to travel and enjoy. Maybe some people want to work for themselves and enjoy that way and build their life. Oftentimes, there's this image that we think we need to fit. Like, we need to fit our image into this box to please society. But at the end of the day, if society doesn't know what society wants, how can they know what's best for you?
Just like you said, are we a one size fits all? Like, human beings are so dynamic. No two human beings are exactly the same. We're so intricately designed and we're unique and different. So how are we all supposed to fit in this very tight box that says, this is how you will spend the majority of your time, and these are the relationships that are okay? And I just feel like the more we're all breaking out of those norms, like for instance, marriage is on a steady decrease. People are getting married less. They're staying married not as long. Why? It's because they're not buying into the old systems, and the old systems get to shift to match the new earth that we're moving into, because what worked 20 years ago doesn't work now. It just doesn't work. And so if we don't redefine and change our ideas of what it looks like to have, just like you said, we get to ask ourselves how we'd like to live. Would we like to travel? Do we want to live in one place? Do we want to live in a bunch of places? Do we want to have this job, this career, this business? Like, we get to ask ourselves that. And you would be so surprised when I first start working with a client, how often I ask her what she wants in any category, and she doesn't know, because she's never asked herself, because she didn't believe she was worthy to even do what she wanted, right? So it starts with the asking, what do I want?
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. How can someone begin to identify and address their childhood wounds that are impacting their relationships, whether it's personal relationships or the relationship with themselves?
The first place you got to look at is, what have I wanted that I haven't been able to obtain? Because that's going to let you know where your limiting beliefs are. So with the women I work with, it's in the love relationship. So we look at, okay, what's the pattern? Do you attract only toxic men? What are the characteristics of the men you do attract? How long do the relationships last? How does it end? We look at all these patterns, and then I have them take me back to the place where those patterns were created, right? So, as you know, I do a lot of subconscious work because people don't know. They're trying to logically figure it out with their conscious mind when that's not ever going to happen. Your conscious mind is not responsible to tell you or lead you to these patterns. It's really your subconscious mind. So you have to start asking yourself the deep questions, such as, what would I have to believe about myself in order to have this pattern? Why would I attract a man that treated me so poorly? Well, I must believe that I'm worthy of having that, right? So you have to look at the patterns. You have to find the belief within the patterns. You have to release the emotion within it. And then you have to adopt new beliefs that support the new desire. So if I desire to be deeply loved by one man, then I have to deeply love myself before I could ever attract someone else.
That's so true though, because when I was getting into my last relationship, I didn't love myself in so many ways, in so many areas. I expected the other person to fill those gaps. It doesn't work because when you try to put your healing responsibility onto somebody else, it's not going to work out. And I completely agree with that. How can women rekindle emotional intimacy in their relationships with their partners?
Everything starts from within you. You know, when I start working with my clients, I pretty much tell them, you're going to have to put your blinders on, because we're not looking outside of ourselves for anything anymore. We're not looking to this person to satisfy this need and this person to satisfy this need. You know, with a lot of the women I work with, they're looking to their husbands to fulfill these needs deep inside of them. And no one person can ever do that because it's an internal job. So you get to fill your own cup. I remember when I started on my healing journey and I looked at my husband and I said, I've had this all wrong all along. You are forever, from this day forward, off the hook from ever making me happy, because I now know that that isn't your job. That's my job. So when you're looking to your husband, you're saying, you're not fulfilling my needs. You're not doing this for me. You're not doing that. Guess what? That is not his job. And in fact, would you want him to do that for you? Would you want him to hold you responsible for fulfilling all of his needs when you could never do that for him? Like, it goes both ways. So everyone needs to understand that everything that you desire is deep within you. For instance, before my healing journey, when I was constantly begging for my husband's affection and his love, meanwhile, I didn't know that I wasn't letting his love in. He was trying so hard to give it to me, and I wouldn't let it in because I had these walls freaking sky high and so deep all around my heart. I was so guarded. And I realized, even though I had been married to him for years and years, I wasn't letting him in. And I wasn't letting him in because I was petrified that if he saw who I really was, he would leave me. It was a tremendously deep fear of abandonment. But here I was with these high walls, and I would ask him to tell me he could never say it enough to fulfill my need, right? Because I wasn't letting it in. It was always available to me. So when I started breaking down these walls around my heart, guess what? I didn't need him to say it to me constantly. In fact, I hardly ever ask him if he loves me anymore. I just realized I don't remember the last time I asked him, at least not in that same like desperate way of like, Do you love me? Because I love me. I love me. So I don't need it from him. I don't need it. It's not like, do I like it? Does it make me happy? Yeah, I love hearing it, but I don't need it because I've fulfilled that need within myself. And now whatever comes to me, it's just an overflow, right? Of my full cup. My cup is so full that anything that comes in is just an overflow, and it ricochets on everyone around me because I be the love. I be it.
I love that because it all really does start within yourself. If you don't love yourself, you're going to attract things that don't add value to you. But when you start to love yourself, all of the bad fruit starts to fall off, and you're eventually going to get that good fruit and attract that. And it's such a beautiful thing because then it's like you're able to pour joy and peace and love and all of those in not only areas of your life, but other people's lives as well, without feeling like you're burning the stick on both ends. What made you realize that you had these big walls up?
The healing journey is incremental. It is not overnight, and it is not, you never get to the end of it. So it's a bit by bit thing. It really comes from this idea of researching yourself and asking yourself those deep questions of, what would I have to believe about myself in order to be experiencing this emotion? So I started to ask myself, why am I constantly asking him if he loves me? Like, why would I do that? And when I dig to the bottom of it, because what I'm always looking for is that belief that's at the root cause. So whenever I'm bothered by something triggered, I'm looking at, what is the belief I'm holding about myself to create this emotion within my body? And when I got down to the soul cause, it was the command, my life command. So in my line of work, we call them life commands, which is essentially the limiting beliefs that are so deeply impressed upon your subconscious mind that they pop up all over your life. So my deepest command was, I'm unlovable. And it's so strong that it's on every traumatic event. When I go back to all my events, the process that I did on you, I go back to all of my events. That is the belief that's attached to every negative belief, a negative traumatic event in my life, is I'm unlovable. The reason why my dad beat me, I'm unlovable. The reason why that girl pushed me down in the hallway, I'm unlovable. The reason why, my husband won't kiss me, I'm unlovable. Everything went back to this belief. Because at the basis of our entire life experience is all of our beliefs held within the identity. And it goes, identity creates the belief creates the thought creates the emotion, and the emotion creates the circumstances of our life. So if we're experiencing something, we have to go back to the root, which is always the belief. So if I'm feeling this certain kind of way because my husband didn't tell me he loved me today, I got to look at what the belief was. And the belief was, I'm unlovable. So it makes complete sense, right? And if I believe on a cellular level, our bodies are filled with 40 trillion cells. If I believe on a cellular level that I'm not lovable, then it's going to be displayed in all sorts of different ways because it's my perception of the world. It's the lens in which, if you think of a prescription lens, I'm putting on my prescription lenses, and it's how I perceive the whole world is through this belief that I'm unlovable, right? Instead of, oh, my dad thinks he's helping me by disciplining me, right? Oh, this girl pushed me down the hallway because she's in a lot of pain and she's having a really hard day, and it was just easy to take it out on me. It's just all perception. So through my little mind as that little girl growing up in that house, that is how I perceive those events, instead of thinking, oh, this isn't about me at all. This is about my dad's shit. This is about that person's shit. This is about their shit. No, I took it on as it was my fault. It was me, which is what we all do.
We've all been there at some point thinking, why is this happening to me? Why is this person being a jerk to me? But in reality, it has nothing to do with you. It's like if you're talking to somebody and they stop talking to you, what did I do? You didn't do anything wrong. It's honestly how that person feels about themselves. And I think that's also helps us get out of the victim mentality, is knowing that it's not our fault. We have two things in this life that we can do: control our actions and our attitudes. And we can't control how other people view us or how they treat us, only our actions and our attitudes. So like we can't be a victim in that mindset. What are some things that have helped you on your healing journey to help you overcome those negative thoughts and get out of the victim mindset?
The first thing is you have to become very aware of your thoughts. It goes thoughts and then emotions, right? So belief, identity, belief, thought, emotion. So if you're feeling an emotion, tune in, right? Become aware of your emotions and then think, what was I just thinking about? So if I feel kind of crappy that day, I'll reflect, I'll say, what have I been thinking about the past 15 minutes? Take stock of what you're thinking about, because your thoughts create things. They're creating the circumstances of your life. So just start becoming aware. What am I thinking about? Another thing is affirmations. And when I say affirmations, affirmations alone are not going to shift you. You got to get into the emotional vibration of the words you speak, because every word you speak is a spell. It's all a prayer. Every word you speak and every thought you think, you are creating your life with. So look at your words and your thoughts as a magic wand. You're constantly casting spells. What are you thinking about? What are you feeling in your body? Because what are you speaking about? What are you even singing about? Dude, those are powerful spells. Whatever you're singing about, man, some way in the way the lyrics match with the music, it casts a deep spell on your subconscious mind. So see yourself, the greater part of you, see your life as just the effect of every thought you've thunk, every belief you held, and every word you spoke. That's the truth. So when you become aware of these things, you can change it. What am I believing about myself? What am I believing about life? What am I believing about this person that's creating this emotion within me? So I used to have this really bad habit of constantly complaining in my head. I know I'm one of the few. We mostly do this. We sit in our head and we complain. Our thoughts are either in the negative past, or the projecting anxiety is just projection into the negative future. And here we are, negative, 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 negative. Need to grab a hold of those. And we need to say, what can I replace this with? So one really great way to have dominion over your thoughts is to have a gratitude mindset. You're constantly in this thankful space of like, oh, thank you for this house. Thank you for this food. Thank you for it's this heart of gratitude will shift you so fast if you practice it. If you practice for just 1 week, finding yourself in a complaining state and switching it to gratitude, and you do it every time, your life will change so radically, so fast, that you will be calling me up and saying, tell me about like, what the hell is this? I have clients that are just amazed by doing that very simple practice of recognizing that you are creating all of it. And the other thing too is ownership, full responsibility of looking at your life and saying, I created all of this. Cool. I'm powerful. Now, what would I like to create from this point? It's taking full responsibility, because a victim blames everyone else. You made me unhappy and you did this to me and you did that and they fired me. But owning it, taking the responsibility and saying like, I am so powerful and my thoughts are so powerful that I created my whole life. Mostly, before my healing journey, I created it on accident. Like I didn't know what I was doing, but now I do. So now I can take complete ownership. And when something that I don't like shows up in my life, I say, thank you for showing up. I know I created that. And when something I like comes in, I say, thank you for showing me what I've been thinking about. So either way, it's a win-win, but you got to take ownership and stop blaming altogether. Stop judging altogether. Own all of your life, and you will start to create such magical and bliss for yourself.
Thank you for sharing that. I can totally relate with you when you talk about words and how they really do play a vital role. A lot of times we hear the quote, actions speak louder than words, but words create the actions. And, if you're speaking positive things, you're going to have positive actions behind it. But if you're speaking negative things, you're going to have negative actions behind it. I remember like when I was like growing up or even in my last relationship was a great example. He loved to listen to music with like negative words and negative messages. And I would always tell him, I don't want to listen to this. And he would always be like, oh, you're such a baby. Why are you acting like this? And he goes, why can't we just listen to this song? And I said, no, because I know that those words are negative and then they influence me to do negative actions after that. I would like to listen to something that speaks more positivity and more life instead of derailment. I don't want it to derail me from
Mhm.
the person that I'm trying to become because I don't want to be this negative person. And he would always come back at me about it. So I completely agree with that your words really are like spells, There's it's funny because I was breaking some words down the other day and I was like, why is a gentleman called a gentleman? And then I thought about it. I'm like, gentle man. And it just like makes sense. Or I was talking with a friend and he said, why do you think it's called the weekend? Week end. Because people are already tired from the week. They're already unwinding and just slowing down for the weekend. And I was like, wow, that's so true. So I really love how you explained that. What are some practical steps that women can take when they feel disconnected from their partner?
Connect with yourself. I know all of my answers are leading back to the same thing, and it's because as within, so without. These are hermetics, just a law, a principle that governs all of life is that whatever you see reflected out from you, from your reality, is a reflection of what's going on inside of you. So if you're feeling disconnected from your husband, that means you actually feel disconnected from yourself. Right? It's just a loss. So when you feel disconnected from him, go connect with yourself. However you do that for yourself. Like if I were to ask you,
Go for a walk.
it's a great one. So yeah, nature helps us connect to ourselves. So good. Prayer helps you connect to yourself. Everything really is a prayer, but I mean a conversation, a dialogue within. Sometimes I do that journaling because it creates more focus and more intention. Um, what's another way to connect?
A hot shower.
Um, for me, oh, showers are good. Oh, or swim anywhere in water. Because our bodies are mostly water, 95% water, water will connect you to you. The source, it's as within, so without. So water is great. It really is the stuff that nurtures your soul. For me, a bath. Like I put my minerals in there. I put on my music, my like healing frequencies. I go in the bath. It is a deeply healing, connecting thing to me. And I journal in there too. But connecting with nature is huge for me as well. I find that to be for most of my clients. Whatever connects you to yourself, do more of that because it really isn't an issue of your relationship to anyone else. It's really your issue of that disconnect between you and two. Get intimate with you. Be so in love with you that you don't need anything from anyone. That's really like the key to living a fulfilled life, is following your own desires and creating that relationship with yourself that is so nourishing and healing that every relationship on top of that is just, it's icing on the cake.
I think that's beautiful. It's just really going back to the basics on what brings you joy. It doesn't have to be anything fancy or anything crazy. It's just what brings you joy. I know self-love is such a big thing. I'm a big advocate for it. I really support anybody who is on their healing journey or wants to take their healing journey serious. But is there a point that it ever becomes too selfish? Because I think a lot of times when we're on our healing journey, sometimes we may feel that it's selfish.
Yeah. Think about why. Because you were raised by parents that said, don't serve yourself,
Mm.
serve me. Don't do what you want, you do what I want. Think about that. We're programmed to do what everyone else wants. That's why I'm on a mission to wake everyone up and say, get selfish. Get so freaking selfish. Get so, and what is selfish? I think the term is so negative, but get so full of yourself. Get so full of the source, who you really are, that spiritual aspect of who you really are, that eternal part of you, that part of you that's so big and so juicy and so wonderful. Get so filled with that it, like, there's nothing selfish about following your desires. I think it's just our negative terms that say, oh, you're supposed to serve everyone else, not you. You're not worthy. You're not important. Do what I want. How is that better? How is doing what they want better for the whole? Do you know what I mean? This is where we get to redefine these really dumb terms called selfish. It's selfish to do what you want. It's not selfish for you to do what I want. Like, that's so silly. And even as I'm parenting my kids, I'm constantly looking at those beliefs within myself that are like, why do I think that my beliefs should override my kids' beliefs? Right? My kid says, I don't want to go to school. And I'm like, sorry, you're going to school. This is the system. This is what we all do. We all are drones. We do exactly what the system tells us to do. Where in parts of me, I'm like, no, my kid should do what, like, my kid is brilliant. She goes in her mind. She has this imagination. She goes to other worlds. She's like, oh, she's doing what I want to be doing. Right. So I feel like in a lot of ways, we got to look at our kids and we got to let them be the teachers because they're straight from source. We've been deluded with all these negative systems and beliefs. They're pure. Before age 5, they're so pure. My daughter's 6 now. You know, I have older ones. I have teenagers, but I really look at my daughter in these past 5 years because I've been on my healing journey. I'm looking to her to teach me how to be so selfish. Teach me how to be that selfish, because that's the good stuff. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be imagining. I'm supposed to be playing. Life is supposed to be fun for me. So I'm taking a couple of cues from you, darling. Like, teach me, and I'll ask her things. I'll ask her, like, do you remember anything before this lifetime? What do you think this is about? What does it mean to love? Like, I ask her because she's my teacher more than I'm hers. So I'm really looking to her to learn how to follow my joy and follow my passion and follow my truest self, my authentic. How can I be my authentic self? Because she doesn't give a shit who's looking. She'll dance, she'll sing, she'll do whatever she wants to do. And she doesn't think, oh, what are they all going to think about me? The way I do, you know?
Absolutely. I completely agree. It's gaining back that a piece of that innocence as well. Like you said, like they're so pure when they're young. And I think a lot of times if we grow up in toxic cycles of not loving ourselves or getting told we're selfish for doing these things or just growing up in like abusive situations, then we lose that sense of innocence and that sense of purity. And I think one of like the biggest
Yeah.
things is holding on to that sense of innocence. Um, I remember I was like working on my healing journey. This was actually when I was still with my ex, and I was really trying to like grow and keep a positive mindset to the point where my neighbor, he works in tech. My parents' neighbor, he works in tech, and he was like, Aneta, like, if you have an idea, you have to put it in the cloud. And I like looked at him and I was like, George, if I write down my idea on a piece of paper, tie it to a balloon and send it to the cloud, how is anyone gonna like know? And he was like, "No, Aneta,
Oh
you're
my.
joking, right?" And I was like, "No, what's the cloud?" And I'm literally thinking in the sky, and he was like, "Your
Oh
iCloud."
my gosh.
And he was just like,
Oh my
that's one
gosh.
thing that you should always keep is your innocence, like, because it fades away so fast if you don't keep it.
Yeah, it's true. It's so true. I mean, we're programmed out of it. That's why I love when you laugh. It's like, you better freaking laugh all the time. Like, don't you hold back your laugh. You're like, let me get my laughs out. I'm like, don't ever get your laughs out. Don't ever, because when you get in tune with vibration, everything vibrates, right? And you get in the tune with, like, a laugh is, it's got an exquisite vibration. It is just, everyone wants to be around someone who laughs. So don't you dare get your laughs out. You better keep laughing all your laugh, because oh, and even still, okay, so I noticed that, working with people is, a lot of times they smile and they laugh to
Yeah.
cover up their pain. And I go back and forth on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't, first of all, I try not to judge. There's no good and bad. It's a coping mechanism, right? But when it's time to feel the other emotions, we got to feel those too, right? We got to feel the pain. But I remember I had a coach one time kind of rip me apart because he was asking me these deep questions and I was feeling this pain and I started laughing. And he is like, you don't laugh to cover up your pain. You feel the pain. And at first I was like, what a jerk. I was kind of pissed about it. But then it opened up a little dialogue within my head to really look at it and say, no, I think this is kind of true. I used to use humor to cover up my pain, and so there is that kind that could be damaging, because you look at people, like, I study people all the time. I love studying people's energy and their life circumstances, but like someone like Chris Farley, who, he was so funny, right? But it was always at the expense of himself. He made himself the joke, right? And he lived with a lot of shame. I read him. He lived with a lot of shame and he was constantly trying to laugh it out. But inside, he was so sad. So it was his coping mechanism, or the way he numbed himself. So there's that numbing kind. And then there's like that jovial laughter that comes from your soul that is like pure, right? So if you look at both of them, just feel into them, because maybe there's some part of you that laughs off the pain that could kind of hinder you from feeling those deeper emotions that might allow you to express yourself more and be more full of yourself. And then there's the jovial laughter. So feel into whichever it is for you. But if it is purity, if it is like, no, this is the most authentic part of my soul, then let that laughter flow. It's delicious.
A lot of times, also growing up, you're in school, you're in some kind of sport, and you laugh too much or you talk too much. And how many times do you get pressed down to stop talking so much, stop laughing so much? And I think that's something that we
Oh,
carry
yeah.
on later on, but it's actually a really good thing that we laugh and that we talk, because if we're not talking, we're not communicating. And if we're not communicating, we're just suppressing our emotions, our feelings, our thoughts. And those are the most valuable things you can have.
Yeah.
Completely agree. Wow, Tammy, this has been absolutely wonderful. Before we go ahead and wrap things up, is there any last piece of advice that you would like to leave with the audience who is on their healing journey or wants to begin their healing journey?
Yeah. Two things. One, if you're wanting to transform, the best advice I can give you is find someone who resonates with you, someone to help you along the journey, because what I didn't do is I tried to go it alone for a lot of years. And it works, like everything works, but it definitely hindered me. So one is find people in your life that can pull you up. Most of the times you're going to have to pay them, someone like me. But, there's also friendships. Look for those people that can pull you up, because you are not going to change by hanging around the same people, watching the same things, reading the same stuff. You're just not going to change. In order for something to change internally, it's going to have to change externally. So that's one piece of advice. And the other piece is that there is nothing that you cannot change about your life, that you cannot change about yourself. Nothing, because all of it goes back to the beliefs that you hold. So if I have any advice for anyone that's struggling right now, is that you can change anything that you dislike about yourself or your life. I know, because I did it time and time again, and I do it with all my clients. So please don't feel dismayed in any way, because from wherever you're at now, you can go as high as you want to go. There, sky's the limit for you. So those are the two pieces of advice that I have.
Thank you for being here. Can you please tell us, where can people find you and they can support you? And if they do want to be a guest on your podcast, where can they reach out?
I can provide you with my link tree that has all of my links on it. I'm very active on Instagram, Tammy N Cox 7. That's a tongue twister. But yes, on my link tree is an application to be on my podcast, is, my Instagram handle, my Facebook. I'm on all the platforms, YouTube, TikTok. There's also my email on there. If you'd like to reach out for any reason, do that.
I'll have all your links linked down in the show notes below so people can stay in touch with you. Thank you again, Tammy.
Thank you for having me, love. It was such a joy.